trying too hard to carry the weight. Find your way through the dark. I'll be the moon when your sun stops shining. I'll keep you safe, I'll keep you warm. Lay your worries upon my shoulder. I'll light the way, carries you home. Lines that stole your voice, it's the promise you keep. No more hiding in the night, when the past won't set you free. I'll be the moon when your sun stops shining. I'll keep you safe, oh, I'll keep you warm. Lay your worries upon my shoulders. I'll light the way that carries you home. I'll keep you safe, I'll keep you warm. Lay your worries upon my shoulder. I'll light the way, carries you home. Oh, I'll light the way, carries you home. I'll light the way, carries you home. I'm running from it, 'cause I can't face it, and I can't force a smile tonight. I'm fighting, but I can't hide it. I'm on a ride, I gotta ride it out inside. I strung the string, so let me strum it. I'm feeling dumb, so won't you dumb it down? Control on the road to find new lows. I'm moving fast, but learning slow. Everybody seems to know something I don't know. But I still fake it. We had it made, I couldn't make it. My heart can bend, but she still breaks it every time. Control on your own to find new lows. I'm moving fast, but moving slow.
to be tonight. Everything was going fine. I'm not ready to feel this way. Should've kept you out of sight till I could control my life. It's too much pressure just to know your name. This would look better on a different day. I'm not ready for this. Maybe if I met you in 5 years from now, we'd have a chance. Tonight I gotta go. Maybe if I met you in 5 years from now, we'd have a chance. Tonight I'll be alone. Tell me that it's been too soon. Tell me you got shit to do. You're not ready to feel this way. Tell me that you don't have time. Say it or just don't reply. It's too much pressure just to know my name. Unanswered calls take me back a day. You're not ready for this. Maybe if I met you in 5 years from now, we'd have a chance. Tonight I gotta go. Maybe if I met you in 5 years from now, we'd have a chance. Tonight I'll be alone. Maybe if I met you in 5 years from now, we'd have a chance. Tonight I gotta go. Maybe if I met you in 5 years from now, we'd have a chance. Tonight I'll be alone. Maybe in 5 years, maybe in 1, maybe in 10 years, maybe we're done. Maybe in 5 years, maybe in 1, maybe in 10 years, maybe we're done. Maybe if I met you in 5 years from now, we'd have a chance. Tonight I gotta go. Maybe if I met you in 5 years from now, we'd have a chance. Tonight I gotta go. Maybe if I met you in 5 years from now, we'd have a chance. Tonight I gotta go. Maybe if I met you in 5 years from now, we'd have a chance. Tonight I'll be alone. Baby, 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 oh, oh.
Hey, how's it going, everybody? I'm Ben from Universal Audio, and welcome to a special edition, a Tuesday edition of Office Hours. Why is it on Tuesday? Well, that would be... Oh, yeah, there's a new update to Luna today. Congratulations, everybody. We've made it to version 1.1. And to help me tell you guys all about 1.1, we brought along the Office Hours crew. We got Connor, Matt, Drew with us. How you guys doing this morning?
Hey, doing very good. Very excited. Happy to be here to talk about our first dot release of Luna 1.1 with a couple or few pretty awesome features that are on more substantial order than the things you've been getting so far in the dot releases. Really excited to talk about them.
Hell yeah, man. Yeah, this is almost 6 months to the day since 1.0 dropped.
That's right. Yeah, we were chatting about that earlier, how this is like very serendipitous timing in that sense. It's just about exactly 6 months. We launched Luna on April 7th of this year. And what a 6 months it's been for the world. But we've been able to really focus in on Luna during this unprecedented time and do quite a lot. And we're really excited to have even more to show for it today.
Yeah, man. You and the whole team in the background, you guys have been so busy putting in features, doing like a lot of, and again, as you guys saw in the trailer, man, so much of this is based on user feedback. What's the total off the top of your head, Connor? Do you know like how many features and or fixes have gone in the 6 months that have been based on user feedback?
It's well over 100 individual items in terms of like, fixes and features. I think we hit, let's see, this is just around 30 features and improvements. So ranging from the very first thing that we did in as far as like a new feature addition in 1.0.3, which was trackpad zoom, which was a perfect example of the feedback mechanism coming into play, where it was like, oh, hey, I just wish I could pinch to zoom. And it's like, duh, we'll do that in, a day. And we did it, and all the way up to the things that we're seeing now with session versions, a huge addition to Luna with a managed media system that we've been talking about and touting all this time, really starting to take advantage of the fact that everything is managed in a database and the ability to version in really interesting and powerful ways. That really is just the beginning of additional really powerful database features. This is really the beginning of things like that. MP3 export, a bunch of enhanced editing keyboard shortcuts, reverse audio, dragging and dropping MIDI to tracks from instruments, healing clips, exporting clips and renaming them, auto scrolling of the timeline. Like we've done, like I said, around 30 features, and all the fixes that we note in the release notes tend to be from issues that we got feedback about. So we're fixing many more issues that aren't noted because no one mentioned them to us necessarily. Even if they encountered them, maybe it's just not worth noting. But if you've given us feedback and we fix that issue, we try to note it so that you get that closed loop on like, oh, cool, the thing that I mentioned to them is now fixed. So yeah, it's been a wonderful process to be so collaborative with the really engaged Luna users from the very beginning and continue to drive this and build momentum. It's just been amazing.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I feel a personal sense of accomplishment every time I see the release. It's like, oh, I remember I've submitted feedback for that one. Like,
yeah, it's fun.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right, so you alluded, we played the trailer, which kind of gave away a bunch of what the new features are and a quick look at them. So the notable for 1.1 track groups.
Yes.
So you can now group together tracks, make persistent groups in addition to selection grouping. And of course, we're gonna show you guys all these features and kind of put them into work here during this show. And we've also got a couple more shows planned for this week that I'll talk about a little bit later. So track groups, number one, session versions and bookmarks. Not just one thing, but two things, like kind of work together in a really cool way that Connor will show us. And then the one that's most near and dear to my heart, which is MIDI beat clock. Being able to synchronize external instruments, other sequencers, basically anything that accepts MIDI beat clock as a form of synchronization, you can now drive those from Luna, and there's a whole bunch of really cool workflows that are enabled from that. But yeah, so if you guys have got questions in the chat, feel free to drop them in. I'm going to answer the number one. Does 1.1 work for Windows? Not yet. We're going to get that one out of the way.
No Windows yet.
No Windows yet. But yeah, well, that's gonna be like, I think that's always like number one question with the bullet up there. So Connor, maybe you want to show your screen and let's. I think you kind of set up a really cool example here for us to watch, which is you basically imported some stems from an old session into Luna, and that now you've kind of started to get to work on them.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the perfect tee up here. I've got a simple multi-track that I've exported from another DAW, and I'm bringing them into Luna. And I'm going to show you a couple of the new features sort of in practice from the standpoint of setting up a new session in this context. In this case, this could be right after you finish tracking or just bringing something in for the purpose of mixing, kind of like what this is here. So I'm at a point here where you can see that I've done some basic cleanup to tracks. I put them in the right order because when I dragged them in, they had different names and everything, like .dupe and all this other stuff that I went through and cleaned up. I gave them track color. You can see there's also a tempo map. So I'll use that point to just kind of describe and show you one of the first versioning features to mention, which is bookmarks. So just to briefly explain what we have in place here in the file menu, you have the ability to save a bookmark and save a new version. And now what are the differences between these? Said as simply as possible, a bookmark is just like I want to go back in time to an exact moment that I've captured for some reason because I really liked what was happening there. Maybe the band said, this sounds great, just Command S. Save a bookmark, say like, you know, the drummer loved this part, like just to have those things. Or what I'm going to show you here is that once I've saved some of these and I go into our versions window, I've got an initial version here, which is always what's created when you start a Luna session. And I'm going to open this cleaned up bookmark, which just says all source tracks cleaned and named. And I can just open this up and it's going to take you right back to this state where I had, you know, there's no tempo map here in place. The tracks have just gotten from this state of what I dragged them in as to a place where they have track color, proper track names, proper order. And then I can show you that I've also created a bookmark for tempo map done. Now, these are obviously really rudimentary examples of bookmarks, but they serve to demonstrate just how simple and powerful this process is, where now you can see I've got this whole tempo map up here. And of course, none of this has to rely on me going to Finder, saving a bunch of different files, saving a bunch of different into a bunch of different folders. We've embedded it directly inside of Luna. So as you can see here with this tempo map done, I've gotten to a state where I can easily see that I've done the tempo map and continue to progress here through these stages. So where I'm at now is like, okay, this is a really basic import. There might be a couple other things that I would do. And now that I have groups, I can really do some of those things. So let me start to talk about some of the groups features. And I'm going to continue with this grouping example as a way of also showing you what we have capable with versions. So I'm going to start out by going through and making some groups out of the tracks that I have in a pretty common manner. So I've selected all of my drum tracks. There's a variety of ways to create groups because we know that there's different kinds of users, folks that rely on mousing around, folks that need a lot of visual cues in the user interface, and then keyboard shortcut, kind of keyboard ninja types. So there's a variety of ways. Track menu, new track group. That's one way. You also see that there's a keyboard shortcut, Command G. There's also a plus down here in this groups list. And I'm going to hit this for now and show you the create group focus browser. The way this works is to allow you to set up what tracks are in a group. And as you notice, all of the tracks that I've already selected are automatically checked for inclusion in this group. And I can immediately start typing in the name field. And I instead of calling it groups, I can call it drums.
Very descriptive name. This is my group. And then this is also my group.
I'm talking about groups trying to create drums. Yeah. So I've named it drums, and I have a few simple attributes to select from for what control and command inputs get operated together on all those tracks and those groups. By default, it is mixing and editing. And so these are essentially self-explanatory. All mixing inputs like volume and mute and solo and pan, all those things, everything basically that you can see in the mixer itself gets added in as a mixing attribute. And editing is self-explanatory in that every operation like fading, selecting, dragging are all going to be caught up in the group. And the third option is for inserts to be linked. So if you have the same plugin in the same slot on tracks in the group and you do something like press the power button or turn a knob, all those things are going to be grouped in that manner. So I'm going to leave this as is for now and just go ahead and create this drums group. I'm going to then skip over bass because it's living on its own here. And I'm going to just kind of fly through the rest of these and create a guitar group. Maybe I'll call it groups. And then I'll create a keys group. So this is piano and keys. And as you can see, all of these groups have appeared down here in this groups list at the bottom. And there's a couple things to say about this list. if you've used Luna previously, you're familiar with selection grouping. We still have that feature. It's actually now even easier to understand and use because it's displayed in this groups list as a separate kind of group. At the top of the groups list, there are two what we call permanent groups that are always available in every session. And then below that are all of your user created groups. So the selection group is a visual toggle for what used to be in the mixing menu and what used to be on Command G as a keyboard shortcut. It is now Control G to turn on and off selection grouping because we needed Command G for group creation because that is just the across the board, whatever
That's
app
what
you're
you're
using.
expecting.
Yes, exactly. So selection grouping still works just as it always has. So I'll demonstrate that is the case here. Flip over to the mixer here and I've got selection grouping on, right? So all of these faders move in tandem. And now it's just as simple as moving your mouse to the groups list and turning that on or off or using the keyboard shortcut to have this additional visual indication of the selection grouping. Another permanent group that we have is the all tracks group. And I'll start to show you a little bit of editing here by, let's see, there's like a whole, bunch of silence. There's basically just a count in here before this, what looks like a guitar part bringing in the top of the song. And I'm going to use one of the trim keyboard shortcuts we added and just press A. As you can see, just by enabling the all tracks group and clicking in a particular place, it placed the cursor across all of the tracks because the all tracks group is on. And that's one of the fundamental principles of what these groups do. Is like if you just turned on just my drums group and I click the cursor on any of the drum tracks, they all get selected. And I can do things like trim and fade and all of the things that you would expect, like click and drag to move. I'm going to undo all of those just to kind of, show that was an example in place. And I'm going to turn all these groups back on. I'm going to save a bookmark called groups created just for posterity. So I can kind of go back and just show you that I've got these stages along the way cleaned up. This is where I got to when I had just brought in all of the tracks, no tempo map, everything's as basic as it could be. Tempo map done. And I'm getting a notification, and just in case that I had made any changes in between those two changes, that I can discard those. I don't need them right now because I'm just showing you flipping back and forth between bookmarks. So I'm going to hit discard and show you, oh, here's the tempo map. And then finally, groups created, where I have the ability to see all of the groups that I've made, and they're set up exactly how I had last left them. Again, those are really rudimentary examples of bookmarks, but they drive home the point that a bookmark is for getting back to an exact moment in time. If you want to use a new container for like a version to experiment with mixing, which is kind of what I'm going to start now, or rather actually a bit of an editing workflow to show you a really powerful way of doing multi-track drum editing, which is one of the most exciting capabilities that Groups brings to the table. I'm going to create a whole new version. To do that, I've used Shift Command S. You can also, of course, go to the File menu and choose Save New Version. And I'm going to call this Drum Warp Editing. And I'm going to say, in this version, I'll start group warp editing the drums.
Connor, I really appreciate the depth of notes that you give yourself for later, because I always need the same. Like if I'm going to go back to a version, it's kind of helpful to know like exactly what state of mind I was in when I was decided I need a new version or a new bookmark.
Oh yeah, and the notes here, I'm sure, Ben, after seeing your many contributions to our feedback system, like you will probably be giving yourself feedback here in these notes in a very similar manner. Lots of late night bookmarks, lots of late night ideas, and you can really use this kind of as a running notepad, which is something that people have requested. So like all of these changes can just be saved at any point in time. I'm now in this drum warp editing version that I've created, and you can see it's differentiated with this little circle that just indicates that's the currently open version. It also appears at the top of your Luna session title bar to say the name of the session in the place of you and then drum warp editing. So let me dive into that by also showing you a cool feature of the groups list, which is that if I command click on the show hide circle here, and just to say that as well, these let you quickly show and hide all of the tracks in a group. And similar to like Spill in a way, but really focused on groups, if you command click on the show hide circle for a group, it shows you all of those tracks. And I'm going to actually do one other groups feature before I get started on warp editing, because if I'm going to go through and warp edit in this manner, I actually like to have a specific set of tracks primarily in view, because what I'm going to do is go through and according to the existing tempo map, just fix major timing issues like snare hits that are on like the half of the bar and things like that. So that there's just general correction. I'm not going to go in and do a super fine tune editing because of just for time basically. But to do this, what I would need to do in this case, because in a grouped manner, all of the track heights are linked together, as you can see. But at any time, I can suspend grouping behavior by clicking this button here, which will then let me make an individual selection of the tracks, or by pressing Shift-Command-G. Shift-Command-G is the same thing as clicking this button, which suspends grouping behavior temporarily, which is what I want so that I can make I'm going to actually go ahead and do this and then make all of these guys really small and then make kick in somewhat larger. I'm going to make snare top somewhat larger. And I'm going to make the overhead somewhat larger so that I can get a really good sense of where the important transients are in this drum group. So now if I kind of select all of these together, they scale accordingly. So I just kind of set myself up to have a really good overview of the drums group. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to click on view. And this is also something that follows with groups, is if I switch all of these to warps view, I am now in warp editing view for all of these tracks. And we could spend a long time deep diving on how powerful group warp editing is in Luna. But the way I want to just kind of present it to you right now is that we've got an incredible system that really lets you fly with group warp editing in a way that I don't think is really comparable out there for manual editing of drums. So the first thing that I'm going to do is flip all of these to tempo, because this is going to create these anchor warp markers. And right off the bat, you can see a snare transient that is a little bit early from this 4. And this song is in 6/8. So that's really the half of the bar there. So what happens in some environments is that you have to get really careful about where you click to place the warp marker. It can, in a grouped manner, create really unpredictable results and often require a lot of fine-tune readjustment or just kind of avoidance altogether of the feature. But what we've done is provide a really quick way of creating warps for grouped transients. What we do is, based on our transient detection algorithm, we analyze an entire range around the area that you've clicked and look for the earliest transient in that range. And that is to preserve the fact that earliest transient is almost certainly the one that you want within this range, because it's going to be from the microphone that's closest to the instrument being hit at that time, which is in this case the snare. So if I click even here, you can see that the warp marker got placed at the snare hit, and I just dragged all of those in perfect phase alignment to the 4. So let's just do a before and after. This might be such a fine, adjustment that you might not hear a great timing change, but the wonderful thing is you also won't hear a quality change because I'm using razor blades. So let me see if this is, oh, you know what? I think my Q level is down. So just bear with me, as we always need to be in a place to get zoom going. So I'm going to turn the Q up on my main, and kind of nice laconic drum beat there. And I'm just going to snap this warp there and go back by a bar. And I'm just going to keep going.
Nice. So this is, man, it's really cool. So what you're saying is, as soon as you've grouped tracks together, now their transient detection is working together, or is it?
Yep.
Is it just kind of looking and seeing, oh, here's a snare drum one, so obviously the kick one is, when you're editing a snare, you can see like a little bump in the kick track, but it's very clearly not the thing that's leading the transient.
Exactly. Yes, that's precisely right. And so the transient detection still originates at every track level, but when you're interacting with transients in a group, all of them are considered together. So here's an example of this feature actually potentially being undesirable. And so this is a good example of showing you what can happen when we apply this sort of intelligent algorithm, is that you actually are finding that the hi-hat microphone, probably because the hi-hat was hit at the same time a little bit early, actually has the earliest transient. But in this case, let's just listen. Let's see if we can really pick that up. It's not really detectable to my ear very, just in this very simple context here of like a quiet drum part. but you can see that it's very likely that there's like that open hi-hat that kind of just was a little bit early compared to everything else. So in this context, clicking anywhere here is going to pick up that earliest mic. But if I want to override that, I just hold the control key. And that lets you, in many other contexts, which is actually one of the most important mixing features that we'll talk about in groups, is that control key sort of provides an ability to override the grouped behavior. So the fact of the matter is, with these two set of features, you can fly with drum editing in a totally phase aligned, really fast manner in a way that really isn't comparable out there for going ahead and just doing really quick and even really detailed adjustment of major timing issues in a drum or any multi-track performance for that matter.
So Connor, how much of this is new? Is this like obviously the grouping feature is new, but the actual warping behavior and the algorithms, any change there, or is this all has been the way?
Yeah, I mean, as far as the grouping behavior, that's certainly the new bits and pieces, but the basic warp editing functionality of clicking and dragging a transient around, or even adding bounded warps, which in this case actually also uses this grouped logic to look for the nearest transients outside of this range, so that let me try to find a really good example of this where there might be like a fill or something like that. Let me actually scroll these in a little bit and switch to this view so I can see a little bit better, and look for some tom hits right about here. So let's go back to warp view and increase the size of these tracks. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit. So here's a fine example. What we have with bounded warps is the ability to, if I grab right here, because I'm guessing that this one wants to be right on time, and these ones look like they're perfectly placed, but this one could be a little bit early. If I were to click and drag this around, of course, these guys are all going to snap around it. But what I can also do, and again, this is existing behavior for individual tracks, is I can place bounded warps in a manner. So this one, I'm going to just adjust perfectly into time while leaving the transients to the left and to the right exactly where they were. Let me just show you that one more time. So I've gone ahead and I've fixed this part of the performance. And actually, let me get this back to where it was on the earliest transient. And I think that these particular hits on the snare are perfectly in time, but this one is a little late. If I click here and drag in the bottom half of the track, I place warp markers to the left and to the right so that the material around the transient that I want to correct stays perfectly in time. And all of this, again, just happened on the group level in a really smart manner that makes sure that all of the transients of that snare hit and that tom fill are perfectly aligned as you continue to edit.
Nice. So major question here. Can we quantize warps yet?
You cannot yet quantize warps, but this is a major step in that direction, the ability to have this level of intelligence across tracks. So it's all in service of like a lot of these broader goals where, yes, it's still a manual process to do drum timing correction. It's now in the range of like, if you are, going and doing like a super high precision edit, it might take you a little while, but you can get through major fixes in a matter of minutes across what was this? This is like a, 6.5 minute song. So It might take you several minutes to go through, but with the tempo mapping and the warp editing combined, you're looking at a pretty swift and really actually kind of exciting way to go through and be absolutely certain that you've got the edits that you want, because you're kind of getting in there and fine tuning it. The other exciting part about it is that it is, again, as I said, all in service of having a multi-track concept of time. Yeah. Where we can look at like, okay, what transient is the correct transient? So when you're talking about quantizing drums, it's the perfect example of like, well, we need to know that the kick and the snare are essentially always going to be the anchor points for this, and then go in and fix issues that are sort of errors in the performance, like an early hi-hat, for example. But we always want the kick and the snare to be on. So that's the kind of thing that we're starting to build.
Yeah, that's right. And that's been my preferred way of doing drum edits for a long time too. Is like slightly automatic, but also slightly manual. So that way you're not just pressing a button and boom, hoping that everything's locked together perfectly, because computers and humans don't always see exactly eye to eye about where things need to be, especially when it comes to tightening up rhythms.
Absolutely, yeah, and especially if you've got so I don't think there's any signature changes in this song, but if you've got sections that change signature and have tempo changes, quantize is only going to work so well in sections on that. And you can totally get through it in other environments. But what we're setting up for here is just like a really awesome foundation for some really exciting contributions to that workflow, I think above and beyond what anyone else is doing, as well as what we've already got here, which makes warp editing in a group on drums just incredibly quick and kind of fun. Like it's like this sort of, you're like, oh, it's just happening very quickly. That gets you excited. Like as we started to bring this online, the speed with which I was confidently and happily editing drums was amazing and really fun to start to.
Wait a minute. Repeat that right now. Repeat that.
Say what you just said, but say it slowly to yourself.
Happily editing drums.
Yeah, isn't that crazy? Yeah, you try it for yourself.
Man, well, yeah,
You don't hear that often.
yeah. Well, and for anyone that had done some drum editing in 1.0 or up until 1.1, we had selection grouping, so you're able to kind of do some of this stuff, but oftentimes if you're like me, you were constantly losing your groups and having to reselect the tracks. So now being able to have persistent groups, it solves the biggest pain point that I had about editing inside of Luna, and it's just becoming so fast and easy. And it's not just an editing thing too. Like you can do balancing and plugin controls, like everything that you would expect to be able to have grouped together is now grouped.
Exactly. And so one other thing to mention that I alluded to earlier, along with the control key to override the intelligent warp marker adding, is that as you see for these piano tracks that are in my keys group, there is the obvious ability in a mix group to adjust faders and any other mix control in a linked manner. But if you ever want to override that linking temporarily to just adjust one track in any mix control, hold the control key down, and that will temporarily override that grouped input. So then you can fine tune something like, your pans, your levels. It also works for switches. And then as soon as you release the control key, the group is re-enabled and lets you make full group adjustments.
Nice. You're getting compliments in the chat, Connor. David's saying this was implemented beautifully. You can tell that you guys really thought, you didn't just rush to do track groups. This was very well considered, and something that is not only building on the workflow now, but also we can see how this is setting us up for even more down the road.
And really, we're in just an advantageous point of getting to come at all of these problems fresh. There's a lot that happens if you've been working on something for 20, 30 years in some of the cases of other workstations out there, and it's like you're stuck, and we get to kind of go at it from a new but also a sort of inspired point of view, where there's a lot that we don't need to recreate, but there's particular things that we can, or rather there's a lot that we don't need to invent or necessarily do better or be innovative on, but that there's certain things like just the ease of use and the time to get good results that is something that we really want to drive in on. So that's definitely a key aspect of this. And just to kind of tie this back to versions, I'm going to just pretend that I've done a lot of warp editing, right? And so the drums are all warped. And so if you recall, I created a drum warp editing version. And so within the drum warp editing version, I can declare to have additional bookmarks in here that, in this case, I didn't add a note. But at any time, I can go back to the initial version before I did any drum warp editing and be like, if I, for instance, needed to start over completely because I didn't do a good job or something like that, or I wanted, wrong situation there. If I, just as an example, wanted to go back and do anything from scratch where the drums hadn't been warped in any way, I now, as you can see, there's no tempo adjustment on these. They haven't even been switched over to tempo mode. And I can then be like, yeah, I did a really good job of editing the drum, or I can tell just by listening back here that the initial version doesn't have the tightness, doesn't have the groove as the drum warp editing version, which I can then go back to and be like, listen to it and be like, yep, it sounds really good. It's great. I did a good job happily editing drums.
Well done, Connor. Well, and that is really the benefit of having bookmarks and versions is it allows you to try stuff out, allows you to get back. And if you guys are like me, like doing mix revisions, I'd be constantly in Finder duplicating my session, incrementing it, mix 1.1, and spending lots of disk space on duplicating sessions to be able to go backwards. So now having versions built into the session means that you no longer have to duplicate your entire session file just to do a new mix pass or try and edit out. You can do this all inside of one file.
Yeah,
and Yeah, I was gonna say you guys not glazed over, but you guys talked about notes and passing. But for me, that's huge. Like I'm used to like that keeps me from having text edit documents buried in folders within folders, which is what I normally do. I normally have various saved as versions in the Finder, and then I've got text documents that I'm having to manage, but it's all right here. So and I view the sessions versus bookmarks as like, to me, they're save ases within save ases. Like that's kind of how I think of them, as nested save ases. And it allows me to go off on branches and do save ases on various branches. I don't know about you, but like sometimes clients will be playing with an edit. So I'll create a branch for an edit, and then I'll be able to live and bookmark down that edit while simultaneously being able to go back to the non-edited version and kind of tweak on that. Sometimes the drummer wants the edit, the guitar player doesn't want the edit. And I'm kind of maintaining two versions inside of the same packet, which is super awesome.
Yeah, and really the notes, you're right, are actually really meaningful. And as you were saying that, Ben, I was like in my mind, I'm like, well, and it's also so cool that because it's in the session environment, in the Luna environment, and then you hit right on it, Drew, which is that you don't need to keep separate files. You don't need to be thinking about different apps and be like, okay, what do these versions mean again? Is there a text file in this folder? Oh, I didn't make a text file for what all these versions are. I'm going to be lost like going through all these. So you get this really descriptive, really personalized view of your session workflow. And the thing
Any
that's
character
cool,
limits there, Connor? Any character limits in the notes?
I don't know what the character limit is. It's more than 128.
Cool.
But
I haven't
so-
pasted a novel in there yet. I'll
Exactly,
try
yeah.
that out. Yeah.
We'll go to
just
Project
curious.
Gutenberg and paste in something and see what happens. But the other thing to say that you touched on perfectly is that session versions really are for the save as workflow, where you're like, okay, I need a whole new instance of this document to really go on a adventure with. Is like, I'm going to explore a mixed version and then, iterate from there. Bookmarks are for that moment in time that you want the ability to go back to, maybe as a backup, maybe as a reserve. Certainly in the instance of sharing a session with someone, if you want to be 100% sure that in the new document you get back, you also have like a breadcrumb to the state that you sent it to them in, to be like, wow, I really don't like what they did. Like, not only do you maybe have that on your disk, but in what you get back, you can actually compare without having to change documents that are open. So you can always save yourself a bookmark of like, where I left it before I sent it to so-and-so and things like that. So it's a really powerful system, really naturally embedded here with this window that shows you, you really could just work at a versions level where if you don't save bookmarks, you'll be just fine. It's just like having save as Drew mentioned in Finder today. So it offers the exact traditional workflow that you're used to with iterating through documents with save as well as another layer of detail for keeping track of what you've done.
So I got a good question here from the chat. Can we copy paste between versions and bookmarks?
We do not yet have any kind of import session data. This is same with the groups question. This is a major step in that same direction, where knowing that we had to solve the how do you create a version of a Luna document first, we're now in a position to fully address the matter of getting data between versions of documents. So it is not available now. It is a very high priority for us.
Gotcha. Can you keep stuff in the clipboard and go between versions? Like, could you lift up a chunk of audio in a version and drop it into a different version?
We don't support doing that. Your mileage may vary. So it is something that can work, but I don't recommend it. So it's not prevented. I'll just say it that way, but don't count on it as a way of copying data between sessions.
Got it. Understood.
If you are going to try it, you make sure your playhead's in the exact same position in both versions, because the playhead is stored with the version. So if you recall between different ones, your playhead will be in different places. So
save a bookmark before
attempting.
Yeah.
And then there was a question a little bit up here in the chat that I saw again asking about the transients for doing drum markers.
Sure.
Which they were asking, does it preserve the relationship between and I think we mentioned this already, but just want to make sure it's super clear for everybody that when you put a warp marker on the transient of a snare drum, it's going to put that warp marker across all the tracks. So the relationship between the snare and the overhead stays the same, rather than putting warp markers on both and then messing up the phase and messing up the recording. It says, yeah, cool, this moment in time right here, right where that snare started, this is our warp mark. And now we're going to shift all the audio together in phase. And this is multiple. It's a combination of the transient detection, but also the razor blade algorithm. Those two together get you phase accurate drum editing in a warp sense.
That's right. Yeah, and just to illustrate that in practice, I've zoomed very far in on a snare hit. I'll zoom in even just a little bit further to show you the differences between these relationships. So um, what you're seeing here, I think, makes perfect sense in the context of playing a drum and where the transients would land.
Mm-hmm.
The drumstick, of course, hits the top of the snare, and then that microphone being closest to that actual hit of the drum picks that up first, and then it hits in the snare shell, and then sequentially in time based on the proximity of the mics to the instrument played, with the furthest transient away being on the room microphone. So it makes perfect sense. It's way too detailed of a level for most like necessary thinking about this process.
Yeah.
And what we've done is kind of eliminate the need to worry about that in, I would say, 80 to 90% of the cases, because clicking basically anywhere here puts the transient in the quote unquote the right place. And in this moment here, in this instance, it is the correct place, because the earliest hit of this part of the performance comes from the snare top. So again, you can override that by by holding control when you click. So if for some reason this isn't what you wanted, and you wanted the snare shell or the tom, this isn't a great example, because that would only be fixing an issue in a really close together set of transients, like a roll or something where maybe there was an error in the performance where the hi-hat was hit earlier than the snare in a beat where both of those instruments are played. But yeah, clicking anywhere puts the warp marker in the right place. And that's what lets you move very quickly while warp editing in Luna. And you also have the ability to get that perfect level of control, but if it's incorrect, by holding the control key. But like I said, really, I would say more than 90% of the time, it does the right thing by clicking and dragging on any particular instrument hit. And you just get what is the right result. So I can just go through here and demonstrate this, that all I have to do is think about the performance and the grid. And I don't have to think about what is the right track. I don't have to think about that here. It's incredibly powerful and lets you move incredibly quickly.
Dude, that was super helpful zooming in and really seeing that in action. Because as you guys all saw, each track, the transient for that snare drum is in a slightly different position. So the real intelligent thing here, I'm glad Luna's doing for us, is it's saying, yep, first one's here on the snare drum, we're going to follow that one. But of course, it gives you the power to override it and throw the warp marker exactly where you want it to do any sort of manual adjustment in that sense.
Yep.
You saw it in the room mics. You saw those room mics staying in their proper phase relationship to that snare, no matter what Connor did.
Exactly.
Yep, absolutely. Well, man, these are such good features and very welcome workflow enhancements, versions, bookmarks, track groups, and we also kind of buried the lead a little bit here too, because hopefully you guys got this email a few days ago for October, but currently I know a lot of you saw it. It was very evident that a lot of you saw this, but Luna extensions and instruments are finally on sale. If you've been holding out, waiting to buy, or kind of dive deeper into the Luna universe, with like Neve Summing or Studer or ATR 102 or the Mini Moog, now all those instruments are available as part of the custom shop for this month only. This is not a forever deal. So if you've been keeping your eye on it and looking out for the good deal, now's the time to do it. I did see a few people in the chat. I think we spoiled him with the Jakir show where we dropped some coupons. I was seeing people in the chat asking for coupons. We can't do coupons every show, guys. But the good thing is that our online store does have sales nice and regularly. And right now, the custom shop one is an especially good one.
It's better than the coupon, really. I mean,
it's way better than the coupon.
Yeah, those deals are huge.
I can't get you guys better coupons than the sale that's going on right now. So just do that instead. So that's one, and you guys are also going to notice that the homepage for Luna slightly changed. So the right side where we had the Luna Basics videos and the and all of the Luna sessions and a bunch of info has all been consolidated, kind of streamlined. Right now there's a nice little banner ad there for making sure that you guys all know the custom shop's available. So you can click on the Luna Basics tab. It takes you out to the Luna Basics videos. Perfect. Yeah. There you go. You can find all the help you need there. And then more importantly, if you got the Luna sessions have moved. So the Luna sessions now, you click on the button on create page, brings you here to the discover panel, and everything else is the same. And just wait, guys. We've got like 3 or 4 more Luna sessions planned between now and the end of the year. Fab's song is going to become a Luna session. Jakir's song is becoming a Luna session. Greaves has got a Luna session coming. We've got another surprise one coming for you guys. Like, there's a lot of Luna sessions happening between now and the end of the year. So that keep an eye on that section for expanding throughout the through the rest of the year. So yeah, the crate just got a little sleeker, a little less dominating for the opening screen of Luna. Let's see what any questions in the chat that I was missing, Matt?
Let me scroll back, see if there's any good ones here.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody was asking about track groups. If you have like a bunch of drum tracks and like the snares on one beat, but the snares coming through the overhead or like a couple samples later just because it's a phase. If you want to edit them, you would just temporarily disable the group so you can move the snare without affecting the other ones. Or will Luna maintain the offset between the warp markers?
So for basic editing, if you're actually well, let me think. If I understand the question, what the person asking is wondering is, can I individually warp a particular hit in the material? You can. It's not recommended with multi input material because it's going to break the phase alignment and cause different kinds of effects in the frequency spectrum, and even cause cancellation and other really undesirable artifacts.
Right.
So it's not something that is recommended, and it's part of why we implemented this the way that we did. Is that when editing any material that is recorded through multiple microphones from a sound source in a room, you should preserve phase accuracy. But if you for creative effect, or if you're fine with the sound of that, you can simply, the fastest way that we have is to suspend groups, which again is Shift Command G, or you can click the button here in the top of the groups header. So once groups are suspended, you can make that adjustment. And then once everything else is in place, if you, let me try to make this a little bit more pronounced. So I'm gonna put this over here and turn groups back on. There's still going to be these warp markers here. And I can, of course, do multi-track or multi-warp editing with groups in Luna just by clicking and dragging here, by making a range selection on any number of warps and then editing them together. So yes, what you're describing is possible, though from a sonics standpoint, doing any non-phase aligned editing of multi-tracked material is not recommended.
Yeah. So yeah, and by default, Luna helps you by keeping it phase aligned. So you really,
exactly,
if you want it, because I know there's in some cases you do want to move the room forward so it's not so delayed, right?
Right.
Of course, you could do that with a warp, or you could just take the whole audio track and nudge it forward. Grab it and move it a little bit forward if you wanted to do that, or you can do it here with the warps as well. But yeah, ideally, this is your snapshot of your drums. You actually had that distance recorded and committed into the tracks on purpose to give that sense of space around the drums.
Yeah, I know the kind of use case the user's thinking about, and in fact, this, in the session that I'll be using today has some of these issues where flams between the kick and snare, and in a specific scenario like that, you could nudge a kick to line up with the snare, and as long as you don't have a lot of kick in your overheads, for example, you could probably get away with it. But as Connor mentioned, it's something in a more open production or something like that, you'd have to be super careful about that, wreaking havoc on things.
Absolutely. Nice. Well, cool. Yeah, Connor, man, this was a nice little jump off here for track groups and session versions. And actually, yeah, Drew, let's pull up your feed here and kind of take this to the next step. So Connor kind of showed us, importing stems and getting started with a session, using bookmarks and versions to, hold on to your progress and set up some groups. So now Drew's got a session that he's been mixing on, editing with, and so you're a little bit more developed in there, and so there's a few workflow things that once you've been working with a session with these new features, you guys are probably going to run into. And I'll speak for myself here. Number one, the first one I wanted to know is if I
pink drums.
Exactly. Well, pink drum, beautiful pink drums. I love pink drums. But number one is, let's say I add another track. Let's say I duplicate a track or add a new track, and I want to add it into a group, or I just in general want to be able to edit what tracks are in the group. So do you mind showing people how to do that?
Yeah, so sure. Luna has handled this really well. Connor and the team have done a great job in making this stuff very flexible. So in Ben's example, if you have, like, I have my drum groups, but let's pretend I forgot one or I wanted to add a percussion into it. There's a couple different ways. Down here in the groups pane, we have the ability, we can right click on a group. And when right clicking on a group, you can you have the option to edit or delete. And here, one of my favorite things about this is that group deletions are undoable. If you happen to do it, yeah, which is great. So if I go to right click and hit edit, I can bring back open that browser, just like Connor showed you, and I have the ability to edit any of those things. So if I want to make any kind of a change the name or change what attributes they're going to be, I can do it either just by swiping here, or I can also do it by clicking the little X, which takes that track out of the group, what have you. So there's the option to edit and change things. Another super cool thing I love that some other workstations don't allow is I can just rearrange my groups, just drag them and put them in whatever order I want, which is super handy. I love to, I'm a OCD nut. I like things to be in a very particular order. I don't like to be constrained by the
order that you made them in, right?
Yeah, the order that I made them in. So anyway, so let's just go to the drums and let's just we'll go to edit and we'll remove my room mic just for the heck of it. And so now my forgot to add my room. A couple things I could just edit and add it in there, or I can just drag it. So if I click on the room track and I pull it down here, you'll notice that Luna super intelligently figures out what I'm trying to do. If I'm away from any of the groups, it'll say, oh, you want to create a new group. Or if I hover over any of the groups, it will actually allow me to just simply add it in there. So adding something to a group, super simple, drag and drop, just like you'd expect, right? Just what you think. Hey, I want this here. I want this here. And you can do that. Something else, another little thing that I notice is you might notice in the track thing that's like the guys are working on like creating just that little break in between the tracks somehow visually feels a little bit more pleasing and a little bit tighter and more focused and more organized. So those are a couple things that for me, I like the ability to reorder them, the ability to change the attributes of them right here in the right click menu. So maybe you only want the inserts to be linked. Well, let me do that to a vocal track. Let me go over here and let me add inserts into my vocal track. And so now, I've got this Fairchild happening on a couple of different vocals. And because I quickly want to just make an adjustment for that, I can make the adjustment that will apply to all members of the group and then just come right back over here, turn it back off, and they're back to being independent of each other. So it's a super handy way of kind of like adding and subtracting attributes very quickly.
That's really cool. And you can definitely, for like you just showed here for like vocal tracks. I know some people enjoy having their overheads on a left channel and a right channel rather than a stereo track. Again, you can make an overhead group that just does faders and inserts, and then use a full drum group for the editing purpose. So you can kind of mix and match. And of course, tracks can be in multiple groups. So it's not just exclusive. You can have your overheads as part of an overhead group as well as the broader drum group.
Yeah, you'll know I have them here. I have a drum no kick to actually to that. Speaking of that user's case, I have a drum no kick where I was editing the drums, leaving the kick to get rid of those flams. So
nice.
It's these little things that matter a lot, for me, like, and the addition of selection grouping is also cool. So like the fact that that's still in there, if you wanted to turn off your drum group, but still, have still do some quick editing of multiple tracks or multiple channels in your mixer, and then when you're finished with that, you can just turn the group back on and everybody's back to being where they are. So like the combination of selection grouping and persistent grouping, really handy, and like allowing you to kind of bounce back and forth.
Yeah. And the real important, the key keyboard shortcuts here, if you guys are like me, Command G now makes groups.
Yeah.
Command Shift G suspends groups, so just temporarily disables all the groups so you can work on one fader, which is really kind of sometimes you may just be in a mode where you're not needing the groups for a minute. I'll suspend my groups for some edits or for some mixed moves. But you can leave groups active, and as Connor mentioned, use Control to just clutch out of the group. So if you just need to make a quick move to one of the faders or move a pan pot and you don't want everybody to all move along with it, holding Control and making those changes allows you to do that without having to turn the groups off or really have to think too hard about what you're doing before you do it.
Yeah, really, really well thought out, and lots of nice visual cues on that as well. So
nice. And then, so what about versions and bookmarks? How have you been using those?
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, when Connor was talking about it, for me, like this has been a really fast way of navigating. I don't think Connor mentioned that this window adheres to your typical Finder type keyboard shortcut. So the up and down arrow, right, allows me to increment, and then I hit the right arrow and I can scroll down through my. You can see I'm not big on notes in this session, but it's like really I've gotten so accustomed to being able to just fly around this in songs that have a lot of versions. To be able to go in there and just go down to that. And of course, right clicking on them, you have the ability to rename the bookmark. Of course, you can delete it or restore it or reload it. So I've been using this a lot for obviously I've been saving the big versions for big picture type stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then I've been saving I've been using bookmarks for the smaller iterations. If I'm working on a mix and a client says, man, I'd love to hear that with the vocals up a little bit, I'm going to do a bookmark within that version because it's such a small change. I'm not really going to bother doing a new version for that. But if they then say, hey, let's take out the third verse, then I'm going to do a version.
Yeah,
I'm going to do a new version. So I love that flexibility and that granularity of being able to say, is this a big enough change that warrants a version, or is it a little tweak that I want to use bookmarks for rather?
Mm-hmm. Well, and, I was talking. We've got a couple of great shows coming up this week. So we've got tomorrow with Fab, where we're going to be talking about Ableton. But then on Thursday, we're with Che Pope, showing off using Luna plus MPCs. And I was talking to Che yesterday, and kind of walking him through all these new features as well. He was so excited about having versions and bookmarks to be able to try out different chains. So say on a vocal, like you want to try out Fairchild into the de-esser, but then back of your mind you're like, would this maybe be better with like an LA2A and a Neve 1073? You can quickly save a bookmark or save a version, try a different chain out, and then easily get back to the previous chain that you had. So to me, it's going to be such a good use of it to kind of experiment and not feel so like, oh man, am I gonna have to undo? Am I gonna lose the changes that I made in the undo buffer, or can I just get back to it now? Which is kind of a great thing about this workflow.
Yeah, for sure. So there, in that particular instance, I just, I swapped out my Fairchild for the for an LA2, and then I can bring that back if I wanted to go back to the original version. Or go back to the new version of the silver of the LA2. Except I didn't recall that one, did I?
It's like it went back to the edit one. There it is.
Sorry about that. Yeah. So it's great. Yeah, for plug-in chains is a super handy way of being able to do that and be able to all within the same document, all with integrated notes and everything. I'm really stoked to see this stuff start to come to life and this kind of depth come into Luna. It's like, it's just awesome to see. It makes it so much nicer.
Awesome.
And with regards to the undo queue is available in all of the versions. So if you're like, how did I get here in this particular version? What were the last few things I did? You can always open up a version from days, weeks, months ago, and just Command Z to see like what the last few things you did were. So that undo queue persistence feature also applies within versions.
Each version has basically its own undo queue.
Yep.
Awesome.
That's
Nice.
super cool. I did not know that. Nice, man. Well, cool. So any guys in the chat, hopefully I think we're kind of knocking out most people's questions here so far. I see Matt's been crazy busy over there on the chat, handling all the side convos and little one two things.
Good job, Matt.
Yeah, great. Killing it on the chat over there. But I think we've kind of explored at a high level how track groups and session versions are working. And as I mentioned, we're going to have 2 more shows this week. One's tomorrow, one's Thursday. And those we're going to really focus on making music using these features. So really putting these features to the test and showing you how to produce music, how to actually make some tracks and incorporating these. But more importantly, for the deep dive, for the every menu option, every aspect of using all these features. We're going to get back together next week and do a full-on deep dive in all the new features with me, Matt, and Drew, kind of walking you guys through it. So if there's anything that we didn't touch on or that you guys are still confused about, by next week, we will completely sort all that out. But again, today we're just going to stay high level and kind of show you guys this in context over the next couple of days and how to make music. Which, speaking of making music, the third big feature inside of Luna 1.1 is MIDI beat clock. So for anyone who's not familiar with MIDI beat clock, Connor, how would you describe MIDI sync and MIDI beat clock to people?
It's an ancient technology still used today that allows you to synchronize multiple devices together. MIDI clock is like a ubiquitous and very powerful standard for transmitting timing information, and many DAWs support receiving it. Not all. We are generating beat clock now. So according to the tempo on the timeline, wherever you are, the tempo is output to a destination MIDI device that you declare in the settings page. And that can either go through an internal IAC bus, which is a thing that Mac OS offers that lets you route MIDI between two pieces of software. You could do that for something like Ableton Live or Machina, or you could use a MIDI device to route MIDI clock to any of the numerous devices in the world spanning many decades that support MIDI clock as a form of timing information. And so, that's the summary. It's a form of synchronizing MIDI capable devices together in either a pattern manner or a timeline manner, depending on what the device supports.
Nice. Well, Matt, you want to go ahead and share your screen? I think you're set up to be able to show us how this works in the box. So using the IAC MIDI bus to send clock from Luna over into Ableton. Mind walking people through how you got this set up?
Totally, yeah. Basically Luna will be the master. I'll be sending clock to Ableton. And the way I'm doing this is with the IAC driver, which is basically a built-in like virtual MIDI driver in Mac OS. So the first thing you want to do just to enable that driver is go to Audio MIDI Setup, and then go to Window and Show MIDI Studio. So the IAC driver will be right here. By default, it's disabled. So you have to double click it and go Devices Online to bring it online.
Mm-hmm.
And then once it's online, basically that'll show up as a MIDI input and output in both these applications. So I'm going to go to Luna settings by clicking the diamond icon and go to the settings cog. And then we go to the MIDI tab. And all of the MIDI devices that I have connected to my computer right now show up here, including the IAC driver bus that I just enabled. So basically, I'm going to enable this driver on Luna's MIDI tab. That's going to tell Luna to send a MIDI clock out of this output. There's two different settings here, song and pattern. In most cases, if you're syncing two DAWs together, you're going to want to use song. That means that Luna will send timeline marker over to Ableton Live. So whenever I click, well, I'll show you in a second. It's not set up yet. But basically, whenever I click in the Luna timeline, it'll update the Ableton timeline to that same spot.
Gotcha.
So
that way, like bar 1 is bar 1, bar 50 is bar 50, and you can start playback. You don't have to always restart at 1 in order to hear, the third chorus or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah. If I click on bar 50 in Luna, Ableton will automatically update the playhead to bar 50. Mm-hmm. Pattern is the other option. So that would be more if you're using like an external drum machine or something like that, where it just has like an 8-bar or 16-bar loop that's playing continuously through the whole song. Then you can use pattern. Basically, Luna won't send the timeline information to the device. It'll just send start and stop information. So whenever you start playback in Luna, the pattern that's playing on the external drum machine or whatever you're using will start
at the next bar position.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Nice.
So for this, I want to use song because I want the timeline information to be carried over to live. Mm-hmm. And the other thing that you can do here is set the delay for the driver, which varies depending on what you're doing. I'll show how I came to this 10 millisecond number in a minute. So Luna's all set up to send MIDI clock. Now I just need to get Ableton to receive it. So in Ableton, I'm going to go in the preferences, go to the MIDI tab, and then I'm going to find the input IAC driver, which is right here. I'm going to turn on sync. So that basically tells Ableton that it's able to receive MIDI beat clock from that MIDI input. And then the last thing I need to do in Ableton is click this EXT button in the top left corner. That just tells Ableton to clock to the external signal and not its internal clock. Mm-hmm. So now if I go over here and click anywhere in the Luna timeline, so let's say I click right on bar 47, Ableton updates to bar 47 as well.
Oh, nice. And obviously, when you hit play, it presses play, right?
Yeah, so I'll go to bar 41. Ableton starts playing from bar 41. I hit stop in Luna, Ableton follows. So pretty much anything I do in the transport in Luna now carries over to Ableton.
Nice. And this is man, this is such a cool workflow for people that want to be able to use both of these together. And this is actually the topic for Fab's show tomorrow. Is he's gonna build on what Matt's doing here and go the next step, which is using this to be able to have Ableton holding onto the track, doing all the beat work, and then using Luna to record guitars or vocals or bass, doing audio recording and keeping the low latency processing and committing to the sounds all happening over in Luna, but the two are perfectly in sync together the entire time. So yeah, Fab's we're gonna deep dive on actually making music using this workflow tomorrow. Any other major things that you discovered while setting this up, Matt?
I'll talk about how I got the sync just real quick. And I just did this by ear. You could also do it by printing audio, but I basically set up just 4 snare drums. You can use any kind of transient thing that will line up with the metronome in Luna. Basically, I can turn on the metronome in Luna. I'll make sure I can hear it. And now I can, I got to go to bar 75. There we go. So now I can line them up by ear. Basically, if I go in here and change this number, make it really big, you can hear this now going to be late. So I just kind of played around with that and found 10 was the one that sounded best to my ear. So that's not the most scientific way to do it, but just for a quick getting things lined up, it definitely works.
Yeah, and this is this is kind of running the two simultaneously. There's some cool tricks that you can do to actually route audio out of Ableton into Luna, either using a virtual channel or I've done this, but I think I showed this on Office Hours a little while ago of actually using the analog outputs. So sending out of some Apollo outputs and then back into some Apollo inputs to be able to travel between the two and commit to the sounds out of Ableton and stemming them into Luna. And I know there's a lot of producers that really love using Ableton for producing and creating, but then are migrating tracks over to Luna for mixing and editing. So this is now just kind of bringing those two together and allowing them to actually play at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's pretty much what I'm doing here. There's a lot of Ableton specific stuff that I want to do in Ableton, like MIDI triggered envelopes and things like that. But then maybe I want to record some bass or some guitar on top of it, and that's really where Luna shines. So yeah, it's definitely a great way to combine two different apps that have two different strengths and weaknesses and use them to the best of your ability.
Nice. See a question here asking, does this work for VI drum machines like Superior Drummer? Can you now link the playhead between Superior Drummer and Luna using this stuff?
You don't need to use B-Clock to link the playhead in Superior Drummer. If you instantiate it as a instrument plugin on an instrument track in Luna, there's a follow. I can't remember what the
follow
next
host
word. Follow host. Thank you. Yeah, it's follow something in there. You just hit that button, which is on by default, and it will. Whenever you jump around the timeline in Luna, the really any plugin that has that capability will follow along. So it's not this feature doesn't make that possible. That's already been possible.
Nice. Yeah, that's cool. And someone's asking about Rewire. No need for Rewire to do this. So, using IAC for MIDI, transfer back and forth, and then using virtual channels would be the way to be able to route audio from one to the other. And again, we'll dive even deeper into this stuff tomorrow with Fab, really highlighting the Ableton Luna workflow. So that'll be coming up tomorrow. But anything else with this example that you think we need to show, Matt, or should we move on to a hardware example?
Yeah, I think that's the basics of linking two apps together.
Nice, awesome. So I will build upon what Matt just showed you guys. So now you know the basics of setting up MIDI sync inside of Luna and keeping it all in the box. And now let me just go completely overboard with this example. So I'm not going to prepare this one all in real time. I'll walk you guys through what I prepared on this last night because it's quite a setup. But essentially, it's all being powered. You guys know the OPZ, the little candy bar looking sequencer. So I love kind of making sketches and ideas on the OPZ. And great thing about the OPZ is it's syncable. It sends MIDI output for each channel. So what I'm doing with this example, let me show you guys my clock settings. So I'm using Luna to send clock out to my OPZ, but it's also sending clock out to my machine, sending it to a Novation circuit, to my Roland TR-8S. I've got a few other ones in here receiving clock that aren't actually using it for this example. But essentially, I've got 4 drum machines all running at the same time, all being triggered off of Luna's MIDI clock. And as you can see, I've gone in here, and each one has got slightly different latencies to it. So like the OPZ is set to 7, the TR-8S is on 12, circuit's on 10. And I didn't do these by ear. What I'm doing is I'm recording in audio into my session, and then kind of measuring the distance between each one to get them all lined up. But what we're gonna do is, the way I'm rocking this is, let me play you guys just the idea. This is just the OPZ. So now when I press play here, yep, it's turned on. It will now be playing my OPZ idea. And that's basically how all my OPZ sketches sound. Just real simple drums, bass, little melody thing, a cool arpeggiator, maybe some chords, padding in there. But the cool thing about the thing I've kind of custom made my setup to be able to do is to be able to expand on that really quickly. So like I mentioned, I've got multiple drum machines all clocking together along with the OPZ. So and I've also made a drum group. So now when I hit solo on those tracks, they automatically all solo. So this is a Roland TR-8S, a circuit, and my machine all receiving clock now, and then coming back in my session. So essentially what I'm going to do is I'm just going to keep on kind of adding layers. And of course, when it comes to arrangement and production, you're going to want to trim some of this stuff back and kind of make it make more sense. But so now all these kind of power together. They're all perfectly in time. So I can come over here, hit record. So I'll just record that little snippet here just to give you guys a quick look at how I measure my offsets. So you can even see, it looks like the circuit is maybe drifted from where I set it up last night. So check this out. This is the quickest way I found to be able to do this. So I'm going to turn on snap, so that way my playhead is right on bar 2. And basically what I want to do is I want to see how far from the bar to the transient am I off. And to do that, as you can see up here, the counter by default is going to be in bars and beats. Click on counter, click on minutes and seconds. Now you can see right here, length. This one right here, this is my little shortcut for being able to judge how these are. I am 0.002 seconds off, or 2 milliseconds. So my circuit is 2 milliseconds behind where I want it to be to line up perfectly with my other tracks. You can see here, the machine is a little bit early, but we'll forgive that. Let's make sure the OPZ is also, it's pretty much right on. So it's just the circuit that is now 2 milliseconds behind. No problem. Hit the diamond. Let's go find my circuit. So I'm 2 behind, so let me just shorten the delay by 2 milliseconds down to 8. And now I'm going to undo that and record again. And I always suggest doing, I've found that bar one, beat 1, everything kind of sometimes needs like a bar or so to really catch up and be perfectly in sync. It varies from device to device. But now we can get in here. We can see, I'm still off by a little bit. Let's see. I'm down to under a millisecond. You know what? I'm going to let that slide for now. It is close enough. I'm not hearing a rub. And that's the real quick way to kind of commit to it. Record a little bit of audio, measure the difference between where you expect the downbeat to be and where it actually is. That's how you can quickly synchronize it. So of course, this is not, so the MIDI beat sync really works great for drum machines, works great for sequencers, connected to Ableton, connected to machine, connected to external hardware. Some of my synthesizers, like the modular, can also accept clock to be able to run arpeggiators. But one of the things I'm doing here in this example is I'm also taking each channel of MIDI out of the OPZ, bringing that here into Luna. So let me show you guys an example here with the bass. So MIDI input, I'm using OPZ MIDI channel 4, which is dedicated to my bass, and then routing that into my Minotaur, my Moog Minotaur sitting over here. So now this track, it's got an instrument, it's got shape sitting there on it, but it's just turned down because I'm not actually using it. I'm just using this to route MIDI around. So now MIDI is coming out of my OPZ through Luna, so it's getting recorded into my session as MIDI, which is great. I can go back and edit it later and recut the Minotaur audio if I really need to. And then I've got this track here, which is the bass Minotaur. This is my audio track with the Minotaur as its input. So now I can layer an analog synth bass on top of my OPZ, which already has a bass track in it. And this is the kind of stuff I like to hear. So quickly layering sounds, ideas, being able to do multiple tracks of MIDI and audio, drum machines, sequencer, external sequencers, kind of everything all stirred together into one session here. So now I can skip ahead a little bit. I've got some chords coming through the Juno. I've got some lead sounds coming through a Tetra and a Sub 37. My modulator in the back is handling an arpeggiator, and all these are just layers on top of the original sketch that I had on my OPZ. So let me solo what it sounds like first, and then I'll play what it sounds like with everything engaged. This is a cute little thing. All right. And now added a lot of meat to the bones there. A lot of little different sounds. They're all kind of playing the same part, but adding different timbres, different panning, different effects. Kind of layers it up, and man, it's a lot of fun. I can go over there right now on the OPZ and do an arrangement, kind of mute things, change the patterns around, improvise, do whatever I'm feeling, and everything again just is staying in sync. And yeah, this is something that I've been really I've been building my rig up to be able to do stuff like this, and now that Luna has MIDI beat sync, I can now actually kind of take these sketches from being just inside my little OPZ to a little bit more fleshed out ideas here inside of Luna.
Yeah, it's such an important step for integration into your studio environment for Luna, and really connecting Luna to the many, many different kinds of devices that people are using, especially today and in the past several years of really booming kind of like, analog modular and Groovebox situations that people are getting into and really taking to the next level with music production. Puts Luna, squarely in the middle of all of those devices, as you've shown here. It's really, really a great example, and definitely kudos on the rhythm Toto vibe there for the beginning.
Thanks. Well, yeah, you're totally right, Connor. And obviously we've now swung completely to such a very analog driven workflow here, but of course there's a middle ground here. So if you're producing a track inside of Luna, you can be using Shape in the Mini Moog, or contact any instruments that you want inside the box. And then say you've got one drum machine, you've got like a TR-8S, so you now want to layer in some more drum grooves like this. All you have to do is just enable MIDI beat sync, make an audio track for it, hit play, and they're working together, and you're able to now add to your tracks in that sense.
I think Matt actually might have demonstrated it in play, but because of the way the Luna environment is set up, and this is fairly tweaky for the point in time when you're actually getting all those timings correct. If you're doing it by ear, you can start and stop the transport from the settings page as if it were kind of a floating window. So if you're in the MIDI settings page and you're like, well, how does 10 milliseconds sound? You can hit play and hear how it sounds and be like, oh, I'm gonna fine tune it back to 5 or whatever, and you don't have to go back and forth between windows. So all of that is responsive immediately as well. So it's another sort of nicety of like, yeah, and this is a great example of why like a small window doesn't work in all environments, and why we use this entire page is like the sense of context. So you're like, wow, I'm gonna go off and do some pretty heavy duty configuration, but the fact that the transport is available the whole time is this really nice sort of little touch that lets you make those adjustments and then immediately audition them without having to switch back and forth between two things.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, were there any questions that I missed coming up there in the chat as I was spieling along?
Nothing specific to MIDI clock. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, and so again, to building on this idea and on this workflow, for Thursday we've got Che Pope is coming on to Office. We're going to be in the studio with him, hanging out, and he's going to be showing us linking together Luna with his MPC as the main sequencer, nice. And again, being able to kind of really pick up the workflow that so many producers are used to. If you're used to working on an MPC and creating your tracks and your beats with that, again, having this MIDI beat sync now allows you to create and then quickly keep everything in sync. So, if you've, especially like the new MPCs, if they only have a stereo out and you want to be able to track everything in separately, you can now do that with MIDI beat sync. You can solo your kick, do a pass, solo your snare, do a pass, like kind of stack up the drums this is the way I was used to doing it in the studio back in the day. So yeah, that'll be Thursday morning at 10 with Che, going over MPC plus Luna ideas. So yeah, I think with all that said, we've kind of given you guys a quick overview of all these features. Again, we've got a couple more shows this week, and then we've got a big deep dive show next week where we'll really dive into each of these features, make sure every menu option is explored, all the shortcuts laid to bear, and make sure you guys are walking away knowing absolutely everything you need to know about these. So I believe that's scheduled for next Thursday, right, Matt?
15th.
The 15th?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, 15th.
Yeah, the 15th. So definitely don't want to miss that one. If you still have questions or want more clarity around using these features, definitely show up then. In the meantime, Luna's in the custom shop. Don't forget about that. I guess we skipped over one important thing. How do people update to 1.1?
Oh my God.
We've been talking about it the whole time, and we forgot what's the best way for people to update their Luna software?
Very best way to update is launch Luna. And if you don't, which you should, if you're signed in, see an auto update. Though sometimes if you've run Luna in the same 24 hours that the update comes out, you don't get the notification on first launch because we kind of space the period out a day. Mm-hmm. Just hit the Luna menu in the top left corner and then check for updates. If you're not already seeing that notification, when you hit check for updates, you will see the pop-up window that appears telling you that an update is available. It'll tell you what the version is, and you'll have access to all of the release notes that you can read through right in that window. You can, of course, also go to uaudio.com and download Luna from our website.
Nice. Great. Well, guys, unless there's any other urgent questions coming through on the chat, I think this is a great place to kick it off. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in, watching, supporting Luna. All of you guys' feedback is so critical to making these updates land as they land and helping us prioritize what features to do next. So keep on using the feedback tool. Let us know how you're getting along with the new features and what you want to see next. And thank you, of course, for joining us, hanging out with us this morning. Good to see everybody on a Tuesday instead of a Monday for once. And
it'll make the week feel shorter, probably, right?
It will. I think it's going to feel like a 4-day week.
Yeah.
And yeah, I guess with that, guys, we'll be back here tomorrow morning at 10 with Fab, and again on Thursday at 10 with Che Pope. Hope to see you guys there. Everybody have a great rest of your day, and talk to y'all soon.
Thanks, everyone, and enjoy. Goodbye.
Peace.